Myrtle Beach, and 95.3 FM, W237BD Boca Raton, the Health and Wealth Radio Network.
Homeowners, would you like to save money each and every month? Of course you would. We all want to save money, but how? By calling Debbie at I Will Advisors, that's how, and have her review your homeowner's policy. Most homeowners never review their policy, but it should be reviewed every year. You commercial property owners, same goes for you. So what are you waiting for? Call Debbie at I Will Advisors and start saving money. 954-753-8080. 954-753-8080.
Want to lower your rate and payments, get rid of mortgage insurance, or get cash out? Find out about your best refinance options by tuning into the Get Mortgage Fit radio show with Alex Michaels and Carrie Kasem, Thursday afternoons from 1 to 2, where you'll learn everything you need to know about mortgage loans, today's rates, FHA, VA, and more. Call the Get Mortgage Fit show Thursday afternoons from 1 to 2 on WNN at 800-827-RATE, 800-827-RATE, or visit them online at newamericanfunding.com, NMLS 6606. The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening. It's Monday night and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. I'm Ricky Siegel, a certified sex therapist.
And I am Larry Siegel, a sexuality educator and clinical sexologist.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here.
Nice to have you with us. We're on the radio in South Florida on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. You can feel free to call. The lines will be open tonight at 888-565-1470. We're also streaming live on Facebook. You can send a message by clicking the send email button on our Facebook page. Or you can watch older shows archived on YouTube. And
Facebook, kind of archived that way too. And if somebody would like to get a hold of you for some clinical services, therapy, how might they do that?
Indeed, you can email at ricky@modernsextherapy.com or call me, 561-809-1080. Thank you for that. I also have the pleasure of directing Modern Sex Therapy Institutes with Dr. Rachel Needle, West Palm Beach psychologist and sex therapist. And, of course, Larry's part of our faculty. And
happily so.
Indeed. We hope to grow and kind of Walmart this baby, because there's no shortage of therapists that need sex therapy training.
No, actually, most of them.
In fact, it's kind of nuts that most people are trained without any sexuality at all. I was ranting a little bit in class tonight about the our usual spiel about the marriage and family therapist that doesn't get any sexuality training. And of course, my favorite ridiculous analogy of them all, comparing them to plumbers that don't do toilets. Like, come on, that's pretty core to the work you're doing. You can't tiptoe around. How does a marriage and family therapist not talk about sex?
I remember that originally even came up. I remember being asked to come in to do a program. It was a Catholic organization. This is in the late 80s.
Oh, sure, I remember.
Actually, it was that runaway.
It was you're right, runaways.
The runaway program.
Half of whom were pregnant or had been pregnant.
Actually, all of them at the time. All of the girls were or just had been pregnant. All of the girls and all of the boys that were in the facility, all were just treated or still have a sexually transmitted infection. And when the priest called me, said, we want you to come and do a program, and basically you can't say words like penis and vagina, you can't bring condoms, you can't talk about birth control. Because they'd never heard these
words before.
Right. And I said, what do you want me to do? They said, well, I want you to come in and teach them to just say no. And that's when the first, I think, analogy of that's like calling a plumber to come in and clog up your toilets. So yeah, and ultimately, again, because we know that this is how this work goes.
Right.
So also want to let people know if you're out there in the field, if you're doing sexuality education, have faith, keep at it, because with all the resistance that people got, I can't even find the right word, but I was like as far as the priest that was in charge and the nuns that were appointed to sit in there and go over every word that I said, they could not have been happier when I was done.
It takes. Yeah, we've won over some unlikely fans and advocates over the years.
Right.
That was part of the growth, even when I took over the job from you and just started thinking that the more religious someone was, the more they hated me before I even showed up.
Right.
And sometimes that turned out to be true.
That's not untrue.
But remember, there's so many wonderful experiences. Father Roland.
Oh, I remember Father Roland.
The Catholic Church in Delray, I don't remember which, Our Lady, I don't remember.
Our Lady of the Evening, I think it was.
Stop. There's some really wonderful churches. Of course, I can't bring up the subject without giving a nod to our dear old friend, the Reverend Deborah Hafner. And she started the Religious Institute for
Sexual Justice. Sexual freedom.
The Religious Institute, religionsinstitute.org. She was a sexuality educator for many years and became an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister.
Yep.
And this, you should check out the website. It's just clergy from all across the world, all different
and
stripes.
position statements and papers on the need to get over that stuff.
That same old theme that sexual health is about social justice and what communities of faith can do in their churches, synagogues, and out in the community. So much of it comes down, the word of the day was outrage.
Right.
And if my students are listening like they're supposed to be, outrage is going to be the theme of one of the essays on their final.
Excellent.
I told them they had to listen.
And, let this also be an opportunity if anybody has any burning questions or just want to vent, if there's something that you find that you have outrage over that has to do with any kind of sexual issue, give us a call, share it with us. We like outrage.
888-565-1470 is the number here. No, I just noticed that for all these years, so much of what motivates the work for us and for so many people we know is outrage.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is it effective? Like David Lay's lesson when he went on Katie Couric's show. And obviously it just can't be cold and analytical and talk about research because that turns
people off.
Right. And if you try and match the outrage from, lunatics who just, like we were talking about last week, all the absurdity and insanity around these crisis pregnancy centers and the crazy stuff that people just yell just because. If you have an abortion, you'll get breast cancer. Like, how do we compete? Right. That's why we're in the bubbles we're in, I think, with these alternate universes people are living in more and more often. So is it a healthy thing that we're motivated by outrage, that so much of what we do is outrageous?
Well, I don't know if so much of what we do is outrageous, other than that we are often fueled by outrage.
Yeah.
It's not going to make us what we do outrageous, but I think there is a lot of, it's frustrating. We've had to deal with for most of our careers that, the frustration that comes along with all of the energy we put into doing our work is over and above all of the energy we have to put into correcting and redirecting and addressing the poor learning that has occurred before we came into it. So it's frustrating. So a lot of our outrage, I think, is just born out of the fact that it's frustrating that, there's no other profession that has to redirect every little path.
All this demanding equal time all the time.
Yeah, and then, this alternative facts. No, there are certain things that are just plain wrong.
Well, during the W administration, when the big abstinence only till marriage push started, at least in terms of spending tons of federal tax dollars,
which we still are,
being so generous with on these programs, right? So it became a formal thing.
Right.
Then the alternative, if anyone like us tried to do sane, reality-based, medically accurate sex ed, was, that's the other side. So we have to demand equal time.
Right.
Equal time to what?
Right.
To anti-sex ed? To the plumber coming out to clog up your toilets? What is the anti... Because that's
what's the alternative to sexual health?
Well, but no, the alternative... What got set up
What's
is
the other
this
side?
Crazy idea of the alternative to abstinence. Like, we were the ones that are going to go into second grade classrooms and saying, what are you waiting for? You're not having sex? Come on.
Really? Come on, second grade? You're old enough. Lazy?
Like there's
unmotivated?
Right. Like there's an anti-abstinence message that either abstain until you're married, or here's condoms for everybody. I'm wearing one right now. You don't have anything to worry about as long as we blanket the world with condoms.
Exactly.
So any kind of equal time is just giving time to crazy.
Right,
That's why we get so
and the
outraged.
energy and the time that had to be put into trying to explain to people that no, it's not a one or the other. The difference is, first of all, we all started with abstinence. The difference is they want to stop with abstinence.
Yeah, and pretend,
we just want to keep going and say there's other information.
If you're talking to sexually active kids, to pretend that they'll stop because you told them to, and they'll abstain because you gave them this profound message.
And these people will only work with those who are willing to listen to them. Right? Another analogy that we started using a long time ago with this stuff too is the booby trapping the cookie jar.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't do what I want you to do, then you know what?
Well, you get
you're
what
on
you
your
deserve.
own, you're going to get hurt.
Right. You're going to get a disease, and don't come yelling to me if something...
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, for all the years we've talked about this on the show. What was that?
We have a caller. We have Sarah on the line.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. Where are you calling from, Sarah?
I am from Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, nice.
What's on your
I
mind?
have something to express outrage over.
Sure.
Ah, good.
So I work for Planned Parenthood as a sexuality educator.
All right.
And we go into a lot of middle schools and high schools and do violence prevention and sex ed work. And recently, one of my educators was asked not to come back after 2 days in a middle school. And I asked her what happened, and we had done the permission slip and done everything we were supposed to do. We'll come to find out that two parents who had opted their children out, their kids were not even in the room, had called the school board president that they were friends with, saying that no one should be subjected to anything Planned Parenthood has to say. And because of that, the school board president put pressure on the school administration, and we were asked not to come back. So because of those two parents who made a lot of noise, it made a decision for the other 38 kids whose parents wanted them to be in the room to receive that comprehensive sex ed.
And how often does that happen?
Unfortunately, we've been hearing this for years.
She didn't bring cookies, did she?
Oh, yeah, remember I don't know why we have to be forced to eat Planned Parenthood cookies.
Yeah, we actually heard
that. We put hormones in the cookie dough. Don't tell anybody. Yeah, we've been dealing with that for a long time.
It really is. And I think, you also mentioned that the school board member was a friend of these parents, so unfortunately that's a real tough one. But in general, we found that so many school boards and district administrators just are gutless. They live in fear.
That one angry phone
not that
call.
the majority of people, that
just the one
angry phone call.
Yeah.
Exactly. Doesn't matter that these 38 parents loved it and wanted it and were raving about it. If that one or two called, that's what they live in fear of.
Yeah.
Right?
We've had other school districts tell us that they're just flat out afraid of what the community would think if they had us in, so they just aren't going to do. They're just not going to have us in. They're not going to stand up to parents or the community and say, listen, this is what kids should be learning as far as developmental benchmarks. We're just not going to do it, period.
Right. So they would rather have somebody from a Be the One or True Love Waits, one of these nonsense abstinence programs, come in and tell their kids that, if you have sex with somebody, you're going to release oxytocin and you're going to be bonded with them for life. And, especially if they're not going to be who you're going to spend your life. Do you want to spend the rest of your life bonded to that person? Do you?
And when you do find your one true love, you won't have any oxytocin
You won't have any oxytocin left.
Bond with them.
That's right. So you won't have any orgasms anymore, no more pleasure. That's okay.
It was weird enough. We've been talking about this all the time. It's kind of a theme for the show that a couple guys ended up working for Planned Parenthood. Not that there's plenty of guys nowadays, but it was kind of rare in those days. Men doing this work. And for years, we've been saying, where's the outrage with all of these anti-choice laws that women have to endure? Yes, since 1973, since Roe v. Wade has been the law of the land, there's been dozens and dozens of laws that chip away and make it harder and harder for women to have access. I remember where I was just reading it today about these deserts, like in Texas, the Panhandle in West Texas, these whole swaths of the state where women are more than 300 miles from an abortion provider because of all
I think there's only one in the whole state
laws.
now, actually.
No, there's 7 or 8.
Are they?
Still.
Okay.
But remember all these laws they changed, like the hallways have to be as wide as a hospital and room for 2 gurneys to pass by. I mean, just this kind of outrage.
Yeah.
But all of the laws around what women have to endure, like mandatory waiting periods. Like some states 24 or 48 hours, which basically says what to a woman? You're not smart enough.
You're an infant.
To make such a big, responsible
decision. That's a big girl decision.
So you have to go home and think about, or that woman had to travel 300 miles and take off work and sit in a Motel 6, pacing the floor waiting for the mandatory waiting period before she can go back. Then the mandatory ultrasound.
I was going to say, even more draconian, these transvaginal ultrasound, that it's bad enough that women, in a sense, women...
First, the mandatory ultrasound, as if someone's going to do an abortion on a woman who's not pregnant. So, okay, you're going to verify the pregnancy, but this nonsense about forcing a woman like Clockwork Orange, strapping her to a chair and forcing her eyelids open and forcing her to look at the ultrasound on the screen. Look at the baby.
But again,
look at your baby.
Well, first of all, I mean, there was that part of the ultrasound, but the transvaginal, that was the jelly on the belly, right?
What was Aiken was his name?
Claude,
no. Not the American Idol guy.
No, that was Troy.
But the jelly on the belly wasn't good enough. Now it had to be a transvaginal, which is an assaultive ultrasound.
It's a thick wand that, and
kind of
said,
looks
women
like
are not
a big dildo.
wanting to do it, and they're kind of raped in a lot of ways.
It's
sort of tantamount to rape.
It's this humiliating experience.
But, all right, and here's where, again, no other area has to suffer these kinds of indignities. Just like with sexuality education. Okay, let's just look at basic anatomy. If you're going to put something into a woman's vagina, are you looking in her uterus?
Well, up the transvaginal, across the vagina to get up through that way because of, you can't get a clear picture through the belly. It's nonsense.
But most of these guys think that you're looking directly into it. Right? Remember, that was a whole big thing with these legislators that were passing this law, didn't understand the fact that these are separate areas of a woman's body.
Well, how about that idiot that was talking about the legitimate rape?
Oh,
right?
Sure.
That a woman doesn't need to be offered
because her
birth control,
body knows.
Because if it's a real rape, her body will shut all that down there.
Right.
So a woman wouldn't get pregnant. Oh,
right. So,
there's any shortage of stuff to be outraged
absolutely,
about.
Absolutely. And Sarah, really appreciate your call and very much appreciate the work you do and keep at it.
Yeah.
Hang in there. It's so necessary. And in spite of all of the crap that you might get for doing it, there's a lot more underneath that even the silent majority that appreciates what you do.
Yeah, we're planting seeds.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Thank you guys very much. Another thing I wanted to kind of bring up when you started talking about the trap laws were that back in January, the Ohio Senate actually passed a bill that would require aborted fetuses to be buried or cremated.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Holy
So
smokes.
add that on top of the mandatory ultrasounds. Now,
Mandatory
funeral service for an aborted fetus.
Oh,
yes.
wow.
So Ohio is just really...
Where was that legislator that tried to pass the bill that if guys wanted Viagra, they needed their
partner's permission,
right, and mandatory waiting periods and all this,
yeah,
just to make a point,
right?
It's so absurd,
right? Yeah, it really is. And now this also speaks to a more general outrage. You know, one of the trendy term that people are throwing about these days is intersectionality. Looking at the intersection of all of these different
race
social
and
issues.
religion.
Okay, one of the things that is a source of outrage for me is how so many evangelicals support Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And you know what basically increased his popularity among them even more? He's up to like 71% with evangelicals. Stormy Daniels.
Oh, they like him for that.
Well, yes and no. All right, it's an interesting aspect of groupthink. Right? And I read an article recently that had an interesting explanation for that. Now, we've always sort of known that so many evangelicals have already said things like they will overlook all of his behavior, the way he treats women and all of that, because they are myopically focused on abortion.
Right.
And they basically are hanging their entire haberdashery on his Supreme Court nomination for an anti-choice judge.
Right.
But it's more than that, apparently. That they
were willing to overlook Roy Moore's resume.
And in a sense, he's a good example of this. What really seems to be a dynamic underneath that is that all of this horrible stuff that he does, the way he treats women, all of that, what it seems to be more of an evangelical value is this all represents a return to traditional patriarchy.
So he knows how to keep a woman down.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that treatment of women, that subjugation of women, the disrespecting of women, kind of knocks them down a peg or two. So, birth control stuff and abortion stuff and women working and being productive members of society. Yeah. So there really is more of that sort of evangelical value of returning to these puritanical ways. And apparently there are a lot, I don't remember the actual word for it, but there was a term for even Puritans at the time were saying exactly the same thing.
Really?
About society is going down the tubes because women were kind of stepping out of their place. So it's an old script, and it seems really more about bringing back this patriarchy, these keeping women out of the places that they've managed to find themselves in over all these years.
Well, you know, I hope people are talking about a blue wave coming at the end of the year, and this, if the Me Too movement takes momentum, I hope it sweeps up this outrage that women. I mean, how many years were we saying, why are women walking around just pissed off all the time?
Yeah.
That there are all these laws that treat them like simpletons, like they can't understand. First of all, how many mandatory waiting periods are there if a woman wants breast implants? Right? Does she have to watch videos of breast implant surgery gone wrong and women dying from exploding implants? No, they don't have that hysteria. A woman could get breast implants on her lunch hour, I bet.
Well, sure. But how about maybe even making a different comparison? How about a man who wants a vasectomy? Does he have a waiting period? Does he have to notify his partner?
And be, absolutely sure. Again, watch videos and look at the sperm under the microscope and say, look at all your babies that you're killing. What?
Right. Right. I mean, it would make more sense to have a waiting period to get a tattoo, to be honest with you. Because at least that's like, you really want to think about this is going to be permanent.
And make sure that
think
you're
about
not
this.
drunk.
This is right, exactly. Right. So it's just absolutely nuts. Again, we talk about women that aren't really standing up for some of these things as well. Look at these Republican women in Congress. I don't remember who it was, but I heard somebody today who was running, who was basically saying that, made the statement that women really aren't interested in equal pay.
Oh, God.
Right? Where are the congressional women and their outrage that, just because we haven't been talking about this in a while doesn't mean it's not still out there, but it's up to us. I think this is the $11 million congressional hush fund.
Oh, that's right. How come nobody's talking about that anymore?
Where are the congressional women being outraged over that?
How does a woman, again, maybe my bias is so clear I'm blinded by it, but how does a woman, any woman, vote anti-choice? How does a woman say, I do not want rights? I want my rights taken away from me.
Evangelicals, I don't deserve any rights. God says I'm supposed to serve my husband.
Wow.
Right? That's going to rear its head with a lot of that stuff. Yeah, there are. Right? I have another intersectionality.
Yeah.
All right. How sexuality kind of intersects with climate change. Right? Some interesting things we've been finding. There have been some reports of more and more areas around the country, especially where we see climate change affecting the water and sea life, that in places where we definitely see an impact of climate change, populations of turtles, frogs, fish are up to 98% female. Yeah. Entire populations are being estrogenized with the warming of the oceans.
Also the plastics and the
all that other stuff,
and
absolutely.
In the water.
So, there's now that intersection.
Nobody thinks about we've been flushing the metabolites of birth control pills down the toilet for the last 60 years.
Yep.
Millions of women all over the world peeing that out, and where do they go?
That's right.
Wow.
And we're already seeing that sexuality, right? Gender proportions in animal populations are being significantly affected by climate change.
That's going to result in extinction. You can't have a species that's 93% female and going to last very long.
Nope.
You know, some very tired males.
That's right.
Wow.
So, again, we have no shortage of some of these things. What are some of your outrage du jour?
I was thinking about this one today, that, from last week's conversation, that it's really, along with the men's revolution that we're always pushing for, the sexual health revolution, with men stepping up, women need to stay outraged and demand, I think, again, timing is perfect, right along with this Me Too movement, that women demand that place at the table and sexual equality.
Yeah. And use that power, especially in their relationships. Again, I don't want to just out and out advocate that, women exploit, what they have. But you know what? When we saw the whole, the whole temperance movement in the 1920s and into the 1930s, that was all based on the fact that these congressional wives basically said, if you don't pass this, you're not getting any.
That's right.
And the entire country was changed because of that.
Yes.
So, maybe a little bit more of that.
Sure.
Right? Maybe it's part of that, transition of Me Too, instead of just, it happened to me too. Say, you know what? Me too. I'm not taking this anymore. Right. Me too. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire.
You can't exploit me anymore. I'm going to exploit me. No, we got to do better.
Yes.
But,
yes.
Yeah, there's no shortage of stuff to be outraged about. For our TV pilot that we're working on with Christina Lynn, we have a wheel of outrage.
That's right.
We'll have to start bringing that into the studio here.
Yeah, I think so.
So send us a message on Facebook, send us an email, and join us here next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers.
Yes, indeed. Have a wonderful evening and a great week.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week. The opinions expressed on the